Someone who internally knows they're outgoing and expressive, but outwardly present as reserved, careful, rule following, conflict avoiding, and almost hyper compliant has a specific name. It's called the fawn response, right? And it's one of the most common behavior patterns that emerges when ADHD and PTSD are living in the same body at the same time. With PTSD, the brain is constantly scanning its environment for threats. This hypervigilance impacts attention, focus, and the ability to regulate difficult emotions. So the stress response becomes overactive, right? The fight or flight system works is in overdrive, creating this abnormal amount of adrenaline and cortisol. And the one way of attempting to deal with the chaos this creates is to engage in avoidance strategies. So the person is not, they might not be reserved by nature. Their nervous system has learned that staying small, staying quiet, staying out of trouble is the safest way to move through the world, because somewhere along, the way, the brain learned, consciously or not, that being invisible, being loud, being fully themselves became with consequences. So we suppress it, or they manage it, then we shrink it. Now add ADHD to that. Adults with ADHD are nearly 7 times more likely to have PTSD than those without. And that is not a small number. That is staggering, if you ask me, okay? It's a huge correlation. And here's why the combination specifically produces that reserved, law abiding, conflict avoiding profile that I kind of described to you, right? ADHD already means the person struggles with impulse regulations and emotional regulations. The brain is already working harder than most to manage itself. Now, if we add a nervous system that is permanently on alert from danger from PTSD, research actually found that the largest portion of shared variance underlining PTSD and ADHD comorbidity is related to the problem with modulating arousal levels, specifically the cycle between hyperarousal and hyper no not hyper yeah hyper arousal and hypo arousal. And it is very common to both ADHD and I was going to say PTSD, right? So what that really means is the person is simultaneously wired to be impulsive and expressive, that is the ADHD, right? And then wired to suppress and avoid, which is the PTSD. And when those two things live in the same body, the PTSD often seems to win because the threat response in the nervous system is a lot louder than the ADHD impulse. So the person learns to override their natural expressiveness in order to stay safe. Now, the fawn response, which is FAWN response specifically, most people know how to fight. The fight, was it fight, flight, and free? Yeah, the fight, flight, and freeze as trauma responses. But here's the fourth one, fawn. And the fawn is exactly what I would describe like a person is when a person's nervous system has learned that the safest strategy is to appease, to comply, to, you can say, even to people please, to stay under the radar, to be law abiding and so conflict free that nobody has a reason to come for them. And here's the cruel irony: the person knows internally that they are more than they are more than that. Like, they could be more unreserved. They know they're funny, expressive, outgoing, full of a personality. They can feel it, right? But the moment they're around other people or in situations where that visibility could lead to judgment or conflict, the nervous system steps in and says, no, stay small, don't risk it. Okay. So, and it's not necessarily shyness, and it's not introversion. It's a learned survival response that has become automatic. So now PTSD is characterized by avoiding and hyper vigilant behavior. Someone with PTSD may struggle in ways that looks like distractibility, but are actually the result of being preoccupied with scanning for threat. And the hypervigilance practiced by someone with PTSD can look like quietness or inattention from the outside, but internally, we are extremely alert and aware of everything happening around us, right? So, where what other people read as reserved or calm is actually hyper awareness. You know what I mean? And the person is not zoned out per se, right? They are tuned in all the way in, watching every interaction, reading every room, calculating every possible way something could go wrong, so they avoid it before it happens. And the rule following piece specifically, that is the nervous system way of eliminating variables. If you follow every rule, you cannot be blamed for anything, right? And if you stay out of trouble, there's nothing for anyone to use against you. So it is a protective strategy that the body has developed, often in childhood, or response to a chaotic or unsafe environment. And that now runs automatically, even in situation where it is not needed. Now, your personality, that's a you can say a separate conversation. You might naturally be an introvert, you might naturally be an extrovert, but trauma adds the layer, especially if you experience something like, as I childhood sexual abuse, violation, or anything that taught your body that being seen, being expressive, being fully you wasn't safe. So now your system adapts, it becomes hyper aware, it becomes careful, it becomes compliant, not because that's who you are necessarily, but because that's what kept you safe, right? So if you ever looked at yourself and thought, why am I outgoing one moment and completely shut down the next? You have to understand that it's not a confusion. That is basically survival meeting personality, right? A lot of the times victims of sexual abuse are like, man, maybe I shouldn't have done this. Maybe we victim blame ourselves a lot. Like, even if you were a kid, like, maybe I shouldn't have done that. I shouldn't behave this. Maybe I spoke a certain way. Maybe I dressed a certain way. Maybe, the whole maybes, the what ifs. And I always try to remind myself when I'm going that rabbit hole, like, I should have done this. Maybe I could have. Maybe I should have defended myself. Maybe I should have screamed. Maybe I should have told. Maybe I should have told an adult. Just going through the rambles of maybe. What if? What if? What if? What if? What if? So you just have to center yourself and be like, it has happened to me. I did everything that I could to avoid it. I was a child. I was taken advantage of, right? So, and sometimes people try to make an assumption that, oh, you have ADHD, you're supposed to be loud, chaotic, and just visibly expressive 24/7, 24/8, 24/9, every single moment. And some people with ADHD are extremely outgoing, magnetic, and full of life. But when ADHD and PTSD coexist, the presentation can shift depending on what the nervous system is picking up. Okay, there are days where when I'm with my close family, friends, I'm talkative, I'm engaging, I'm present fully in my my personality. And then there are days where you're just quiet, observing, calculated, holding parts of yourself back. And both of those versions are real. Neither of it is fake. You're not shape shifting. What's that term? You're not being fake. I guess that's the only term I can think of right now. you know Trauma doesn't erase your personality, but it modifies how safe it feels to express it, right? Especially if your experience has taught you being seen came with consequences. Again, being expressive led to punishment, rejection, or harm. Speaking up created conflict, or being too much made you a target. And for many people, especially those who have experienced things like things that align with your PTSD, visibility equals danger. So you adapt, you become very compliant. I feel like for me, myself, I'm very compliant. Like I don't want anything to be like, oh, you did this. No, no, no. I will do anything in my power for it not to be like, oh, well, you should have done. No, 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 no. You're not going to use it against me. No, 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 no. No, like, no, 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 no. No, Linda. No, Jessica. No, 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 please. No, no, no. So, and there are days where, like, you know what, I'm actually funny, I'm expressive, I have a personality that people will love. And I am naturally, I would think, like, people are able to approach me. Like, I have that approachability, good personality, but it's just that internally I'm like, whoa, do not make a mistake. Do not say something you might be used against you. So it's just that you have to, the nervous system, okay? It's like we have to make sure, is it safe this time? So if you ever looked at yourself again, why am I this one woman and the other woman I'm not like that? It's not inconsistency. That's not it is you being all over the place, all right? But it is your nervous system doing exactly what it's trained to do, protecting you, right? So there are some things that you can do, right? Like EMDR, somatic therapy, and trauma focused CBT are all evidence based approaches that specifically work on helping the nervous system to learn that it is safe to come out, that being seen is not a threat, that being fully yourself is not dangerous. And healing is not about forcing yourself to suddenly be loud or different or healed overnight. It's a slow teaching your nervous system you don't have to stay in the survival mode anymore. You're allowed to take up space. You're allowed to be seen. You're allowed to exist without constantly preparing for something to go wrong, right? And it takes time. It takes a lot of practice. It takes giving yourself grace on the days where you still have to pull back, where you still go quiet, where you still choose safety over expression, because those days, they're not failures. It's just process and progress. So be gentle with yourself on that journey, because you're not trying to become someone new. You're learning how to feel safe enough to finally be who you've always been. I just wanted to come and chit chat about that in terms of ADHD and PTSD. If you haven't already subscribed and you haven't liked, I don't know what you're waiting for, but I would highly, highly, highly love it if you can click that like button, subscribe, comment how you feel. What did you relate to this? Do you feel like you are a reserved person because of your ADHD or PTSD, or do you feel like you're outgoing, but there are days where you're just like I can't do this anymore? If that's how you feel, that's how you feel. Bye.